When your own father grabs a $42 million check with your name on it and lights it on fire right in front of you, most people would scream. Most people would fight. Most people would break down crying in that sterile conference room that smells like lemon polish and broken promises. I just smiled, because what he burned wasn't what he thought it was. And what happened next shocked even my own family, the ones who thought they knew me, the ones who thought they could erase me, the ones who had no idea what I'd learned in 8 years of military service about patience, strategy, and the art of invisible warfare. This isn't just another family drama. This is about what happens when the people who raised you decide you're worth more dead than alive. And how sometimes, the best revenge isn't loud or flashy, it's quiet, calculated, and built from the ashes of their own greed. I'm Maya Chen, and I hadn't spoken to my father in almost 6 years when I walked into that conference room. The last time we'd been in the same room, he'd called me a disappointment for choosing the army over his tech company. Said I was throwing away my future for playing soldier. Now I was back from my final deployment, 28 years old, with scars they couldn't see and a purple heart they'd never acknowledge. And apparently, I was about to inherit everything. The conference room at Morrison & Associates felt like a corporate boardroom designed to intimidate. My sister Emma was already seated, legs crossed, wearing that same condescending expression she'd perfected in high school. She'd always been the golden child, Stanford MBA, married to a hedge fund manager, 2 kids who called her mommy, in that precious way that made family gatherings feel like performance art. Richard Chen, my father, sat at the head of the table like he was chairing a board meeting instead of attending his own father's will reading. 3-piece suit, American flag pin, that carefully controlled expression that said he'd already calculated every possible outcome. Mrs. Morrison, the family attorney, had worked with us for decades. She'd drafted my first legal document when I was 16, a trust fund I'd never touched, money I'd never needed because I'd learned to survive on my own. No one asked about my service, I noticed immediately. No, welcome home, no, glad you made it back safely. Just uncomfortable silence and the kind of tension that fills rooms when people are pretending to grieve while calculating their inheritance. Mrs. Morrison cleared her throat and began reading Grandpa Thomas's will. Her voice was steady, professional. Like she'd done this dance 1,000 times before with families who loved money more than each other. To Emma Chen Morrison, she read, the family property at Lake Tahoe and the collection of first edition philosophy books. Emma blinked hard. She'd expected the company. 20 years of being daddy's favorite, and she got books and a vacation house. To Richard Chen, Mrs. Morrison continued, the vintage Porsche collection and a $50,000 donation to the Stanford Business School made in his name. My father's jaw tightened. $50,000. To a man worth $200 million, that was pocket change. That was a message. Then came the part that changed everything. To Maya Chen, my granddaughter, my conscience, and the only person in this family who ever told me the truth, I leave the remainder of my estate. This includes all financial holdings, real estate investments, and controlling interest in Chen Technologies. Effective immediately. The silence was deafening. Emma's coffee cup rattled against the saucer. Richard's face went through several shades of red before settling on a dangerous calm. Mrs. Morrison slid a check across the table. $42,347,000. Clean, signed, official. I hadn't even reached for it when Richard exploded. You think this brings you back, he snarled, lunging across the table to snatch the check. You think you can abandon this family for years, play war games overseas, and come back to collect a fortune? And right there, in front of the lawyer and my sister, he pulled out his gold lighter, the one Grandpa had given him for his college graduation, and set the check on fire. The paper curled in his hands, Grandpa's signature disappearing in the flames like it had never existed. Emma gasped. Mrs. Morrison leaned back in her chair with the expression of someone who'd seen this particular brand of family dysfunction before. That's what you get for walking out on us, he said, flicking the ashes across the mahogany table. You're not part of this family anymore. I didn't flinch. I didn't shout. I just smiled. Not the happy kind, the kind you wear when you're 3 steps ahead of everyone else in the room and they don't even know the game has started, because what he burned wasn't what he thought it was. Hidden in my jacket pocket was a second envelope. Sealed with red wax and marked with Grandpa's distinctive handwriting, open only if they try to burn it. They did. So I would. But not yet. First, I had to sit there and watch them unravel. Emma started demanding a second reading, claiming something wasn't right. Richard accused Mrs. Morrison of forgery, like she was some criminal mastermind with a weakness for military granddaughters. There will be an investigation, he declared. This is fraud. Maya hasn't been part of this family in years. She doesn't deserve what? I interrupted quietly. The money Grandpa earned building a company from nothing? The inheritance he chose to leave me because I'm the only one who never asked him for anything. The room went silent. I stood up, smoothing my jacket, feeling the weight of the envelope against my ribs. "I'll be in touch," I said to Mrs. Morrison. Then I walked out without another word, leaving them to their ashes and their rage. If you're still watching, drop a comment if you've ever had family members who thought they could rewrite your story. Because that's exactly what mine was about to try. The parking lot was half empty, just like I remembered from childhood visits to this building. Same cracked asphalt, same oak tree by the entrance where I used to hide when family gatherings got too intense. Back then, I was just a kid who didn't understand why money made people so cruel. Now I was a veteran who'd learned that some wars start at home. I drove to my apartment, a modest 2-bedroom in a complex that had seen better days. No shame in it. Military housing allowance doesn't stretch to luxury, and I'd learned to live within my means. The envelope sat on my kitchen counter like a ticking bomb while I made coffee and tried to process what had just happened. My phone buzzed. A text from Emma: "We need to talk. This isn't over." I turned it off. Whatever she wanted to say could wait until I understood what Grandpa had really left me. The envelope was thick, sealed with the same red wax he'd used for birthday cards when I was little. Inside, I found a single sheet of paper and a USB drive taped to the back with surgical precision. The paper was a trust transfer document, notarized and dated 3 weeks before Grandpa's death. The check Richard had burned was real, but it was also a decoy. The actual inheritance, the money, the company shares, the real estate, had already been transferred into an untouchable trust with my name on it. I stared at the account numbers, the legal language, the careful signatures. The last 4 digits of the account number were my birthday reversed. Of course they were. Grandpa never did anything without meaning. I plugged in the USB drive. No password required. Just a single folder labeled Truth. Inside were bank documents, legal authorizations, corporate transfer papers, and something that made my blood run cold: a draft of a second will, one that cut me out entirely. It was dated 6 months ago, in Richard's handwriting, with Emma's signature as witness. They'd been planning this for half a year, but that wasn't the worst part. I opened my banking app to check if the trust transfer had gone through. The app wouldn't load. Error message: account not found. I tried my credit cards. Declined. I tried my military benefits account. Same error. My hand started shaking as I dialed customer service. "Hi, I'm having trouble accessing my accounts," I told the representative. "Everything's showing as invalid. Can I get your social security number and full name?" I provided both. A pause. Then, "I'm sorry, Ms. Chen. Our records show this social security number is marked as deceased. The account was closed 2 weeks ago by court order." My heart stopped. "That's impossible. I'm talking to you right now. I understand your frustration, but according to our legal department, Maya Chen was declared legally dead on March 15. The documentation came from the county registrar's office." I hung up and immediately called the DMV. Same story. Social Security Administration. Same story. The IRS. Same story. According to the government, I had died 3 weeks ago. According to the system, I didn't exist. Someone had murdered me on paper. I grabbed my keys and drove straight to the county registrar's office. The clerk, a tired-looking woman in her 50s, pulled up my file and frowned. "This is unusual," she said. "You were declared deceased through an emergency court order filed by..." She paused, reading. "Your father, Richard Chen. He provided a death certificate from a military hospital in Germany, confirmed by a military chaplain." "I was never in Germany," I said. "I was stationed in Kuwait and then South Korea. I've been stateside for 3 months." She looked at me like I was a ghost. "Sir, I'm going to need you to file a correction through the Vital Records Department. This will require extensive documentation to prove you're alive." "How long does that take?" "Could be 6 months. Maybe longer if there's a challenge." I left the office feeling like I was disappearing in real time. People walked past me on the sidewalk like I was solid, real, human. But according to every system that mattered, I was dead. And someone had made sure I stayed that way. That night, I pulled out every letter Grandpa had sent me during my service. Dozens of them, carefully folded and saved in a shoebox I'd carried through 3 deployments. His handwriting had stayed steady even as his health declined, each letter a lifeline when I felt most isolated. In one of the older letters, I found something I'd forgotten about: a small brass key wrapped in tissue paper. The note attached said, "For the Rainy Day Fund. Box 247, First National Trust, downtown. You'll know when you need it." I'd assumed it was just another one of his mysterious gifts, like the silver compass he'd given me before basic training or the leather journal he'd sent for my first deployment. But now, with my entire legal existence erased, it felt like a lifeline. The next morning, I drove to First National Trust. The building was old-school elegant, all marble and brass fixtures, the kind of place where money moved in whispers and handshakes. I presented the key to a security guard who looked like he'd been there since the building opened. "Box 247, he said, checking his ledger. "Follow me." The safety deposit box room was silent except for the hum of climate control. Box 247 was larger than I'd expected. Inside was a black leather portfolio and a manila envelope marked, "Emergency use only." The portfolio contained documents that made my heart race, a complete backup of my military records, including deployment orders, commendations, and medical files. Copies of my original Social Security card, birth certificate, and passport. Financial records showing regular transfers from T. Chen to my accounts over the past 8 years, money I'd thought was my military pay, but now realized was Grandpa. Supplementing my income, the manila envelope was heavier. Inside, I found a certified copy of my real death certificate, not the fake one Richard had filed, but an official document from the military, dated 40 years in the future. Attached was a note in Grandpa's handwriting: "They can't kill someone who's already supposed to be alive." At the bottom of the envelope was a flash drive and a note that made my blood freeze: "They've been planning this since you enlisted. Play this when you're ready to know the truth." I drove home in a daze, clutching the flash drive like it contained the secrets of the universe. Maybe it did. I plugged it into my laptop with shaking hands. A single video file appeared on the screen. "For Maya, the truth about your family." Grandpa's face filled the screen. He looked older, thinner, but his eyes still held that sharp intelligence I'd loved as a child. He was sitting in his home office, the one with the wall of awards and family photos, including several of me in uniform that I'd never seen before. "Maya," he said, his voice calm but tired. "If you're watching this, then Richard did exactly what I knew he would do. He declared you dead to steal your inheritance." I felt sick. This had all been planned. "I've been watching him for years," Grandpa continued. "Ever since you enlisted, he's been bitter. Not just disappointed, bitter. He saw your military service as a personal rejection of everything he built. But more than that, he saw you as a threat." The camera was steady, but I could see Grandpa's hands shaking slightly as he reached for a file folder. "You're the only one who ever challenged him. The only one who chose principle over profit. Emma fell in line, became the daughter he wanted. But you? You became the person I hoped you'd become. And that scared him." Grandpa opened the folder, revealing documents I couldn't quite read from the video. "He's been embezzling from the company for 3 years. Small amounts, hidden in consulting fees and executive bonuses. He knew that when I died, you'd have the authority to audit the books. You'd find the missing money, and he'd lose everything." My hands were clenched so tight my knuckles were white. This wasn't just about inheritance. This was about covering up a crime. "So he devised a plan," Grandpa said. "Declare you dead while you were deployed, forge your signature on documents transferring your inheritance to Emma, and make it look like you'd agreed to it before your death. Clean, simple, and completely illegal." The video paused as Grandpa took a sip of water. When he continued, his voice was harder. "But I've been 3 steps ahead of him for months. The real inheritance isn't in the trust he thinks he's stealing from. It's in an account he doesn't know exists, protected by documents he can't forge. And more importantly, I've been documenting everything." He leaned forward, looking directly into the camera. "Maya, you're not just my heir. You're my justice. Everything you need to destroy him legally is in this room. But more importantly, everything you need to rebuild what he's tried to tear down is in your hands." The video ended with coordinates and a timestamp: Storage Unit 156, Westfield Storage, Combination 0847, your enlistment date. Go alone. Trust no one until you've seen everything. I sat in the darkness of my apartment, feeling the weight of a war I'd never asked to fight. But I was a soldier. I'd been trained for this. Not the family betrayal part, they don't teach you how to handle that in basic training. But the strategy, the patience, the ability to gather intelligence and strike when your enemy thinks they're safe. Richard had declared war on me. He just didn't know I was about to return fire. The next morning, I drove to Westfield Storage. Unit 156 was in the back corner, away from the main traffic areas. The combination lock opened easily, and inside I found something that took my breath away: a complete war room. Filing cabinets lined the walls, each drawer meticulously labeled: financial records, legal documents, communication logs, evidence files. In the center of the room was a desk with a computer, 2 monitors, and a printer. A note on the desk read: "Maya, everything you need is here. The password is truth teller, what you've always been. Love, Grandpa." I spent the next 6 hours going through everything. Financial records showed Richard had embezzled over $2 million from the company. Email logs revealed communications with a corrupt military records clerk who'd helped fake my death certificate. Legal documents showed Emma had been forging my signature on various paperwork for months, but the most damning evidence was in a folder marked insurance fraud. Richard had taken out a $5 million life insurance policy on me 6 months ago, listing himself as the beneficiary. He hadn't just planned to steal my inheritance, he'd planned to profit from my death. I sat back in the chair, trying to process the magnitude of what I'd discovered. This wasn't just family greed. This was systematic fraud, conspiracy, and attempted murder of my legal identity. My phone rang. Emma. Maya, we need to talk. I know you're upset about what happened at the will reading, but, where are you? I interrupted. At home. Why? I'm coming over. We need to have a conversation about forgery and fraud. She was quiet for a moment. I don't know what you're talking about. You will. I hung up and gathered the evidence I needed. Emma's house was a monument to her husband's success, modern, expensive, and cold. She answered the door in yoga pants. And a sweater that probably cost more than I made in a month. You look terrible, she said, which was probably true. I'd been up all night reading documents about my family's betrayal. We need to talk, I said, walking past her into the living room. About my signatures. About my death certificate. About the insurance policy. Emma's face went pale. Maya, I don't know what you think you found, but I found everything. I placed a folder on her coffee table. Bank records showing you transferred money from accounts using my forged signature. Email chains between you and Richard planning my legal disappearance. And most importantly, proof that you've been stealing from me for months. She sat down heavily on her couch, staring at the folder like it was a poisonous snake. It wasn't supposed to happen like this, she whispered. How was it supposed to happen? Richard said, he said you'd abandoned us. That you'd chosen the military over family. He said you didn't deserve the inheritance, that you'd just waste it or give it away to charity. I felt a cold anger settling in my chest. So you decided to steal it. We thought you'd never come back. Your last letter was so angry, so final. We thought you were done with us. I was done with his controlling, his manipulation, his constant criticism. I was never done with family. But apparently, you were done with me. Emma started crying. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. You didn't just hurt me. You tried to erase me. Do you understand what it's like to be declared dead while you're still breathing? She looked up at me with red eyes. What do you want? I want the truth. All of it. And I want you to help me prove what Richard has done. Emma wiped her eyes and took a shaky breath. There's something else. Something worse. I felt my stomach drop. What? Richard didn't just forge your death certificate. He's been telling people you died in combat. He's been playing the grieving father, getting sympathy from business partners and friends. He even had the company issue a memorial scholarship in your name. The room spun. He'd been profiting from my fake death in every way possible, financially, socially, emotionally. I was his tragedy, his loss, his proof that he'd sacrificed for his country. There's more, Emma continued. He's planning to have you declared permanently deceased next month. He's found a military lawyer who'll make it impossible to reverse. I stood up, pacing to the window. Outside, Emma's perfect suburban neighborhood looked peaceful, normal. Inside, I was planning a war. What do you want me to do? Emma asked. I turned back to her. I want you to help me bring him down. Not just expose him, destroy him. Legally, publicly, completely. She nodded slowly. Okay. But Maya, he's not going to go down quietly. He'll fight dirty. Good, I said. So will I. Over the next week, Emma and I worked together to build an airtight case. She provided access to Richard's home office, his computer, his financial records. I used my military training to document everything methodically, building a chain of evidence that would be impossible to dispute. The key was the insurance policy. Richard had been so focused on the inheritance that he'd gotten careless with the life insurance fraud. The dates didn't match, the signatures were sloppy, and the beneficiary designation had been changed 3 times in 6 months. I also discovered something else. Richard had been working with a criminal records clerk named David Morrison, Mrs. Morrison's son. The family lawyer had been helping Richard commit fraud against her own client. The irony was almost perfect, but I needed more than evidence. I needed strategy. I called my former commanding officer, Colonel Sarah Martinez, who'd become something of a mentor during my service. She'd left the military 2 years ago to start a security consulting firm, and she had connections throughout the legal and media worlds. Chen, she said when she answered. I heard you were dead. Yeah, that's actually why I'm calling. I explained the situation. Colonel Martinez listened without interruption, asking only technical questions about dates and documentation. This is bigger than family drama, she said finally. This is organized fraud against a military member. The FBI would be interested in this. I want to handle it myself first. Military justice. What do you need? A lawyer who specializes in military fraud cases. Someone who won't be intimidated by Richard's money or connections. I know exactly. The person. Captain Rebecca Torres, JAG Corps, recently retired. She's been looking for a case like this to make her mark in civilian practice. Captain Torres was everything I'd hoped for, smart, aggressive, and personally offended by Richard's crimes. She reviewed my evidence with the precision of a military investigation and the hunger of a prosecutor who'd found the perfect case. We have enough to destroy him, she said. But we need to be strategic about timing and presentation. Your father has spent months building sympathy as a grieving parent. We need to shatter that image completely. What do you recommend? We go public first. Media attention before legal action. Once the story breaks, he'll be under too much scrutiny to destroy evidence or intimidate witnesses. I contacted Nash Williams, an investigative journalist who'd covered military affairs for the Washington Post. He'd written several articles about veterans' rights and fraud against military families. This is incredible, he said after reviewing the evidence. But I need to verify everything independently. Can you get me access to the original documents? Everything you need is in Storage Unit 156. My grandfather documented everything. Nash spent 3 days verifying the story. He interviewed Emma, cross-referenced financial records, and confirmed the insurance fraud with his own sources. When he was finished, he had a story that would destroy Richard Chen's life. When do you want this to run? He asked. Now, I said. I'm tired of being dead. The story broke on a Tuesday morning. Tech executive declares war hero daughter dead to steal $42 million inheritance. It was accompanied by copies of the fake death certificate, the insurance policy, and audio recordings of Richard discussing the plan with Emma. The response was immediate and devastating. Richard's business partners started calling for his resignation. Veterans organizations issued statements condemning his actions. Social media exploded with outrage and support for me, but Richard wasn't finished. He held a press conference that afternoon, standing behind a podium with the American flag and a photo of me in uniform. My daughter has been struggling with PTSD since her return from deployment, he said, his voice cracking with fake emotion. She's been making accusations, creating false documents, and trying to damage our family's reputation. We've been trying to get her help, but she refuses treatment. It was a masterful performance. He positioned himself as the concerned father of a mentally ill veteran, trying to protect his family from false accusations. The media coverage immediately shifted, with some outlets questioning whether my claims were reliable. I watched the press conference from Captain Torres's office, feeling the familiar rage that had driven me through 8 years of military service. Richard thought he could manipulate public opinion like he'd manipulated our family for decades. He was wrong. Time for phase 2, I said to Captain Torres. That evening, I held my own press conference. But instead of standing behind a podium, I sat at a simple table with my military awards displayed in front of me. Instead of a prepared statement, I spoke directly to the camera. My name is Maya Chen. I'm a veteran of the United States Army, and I'm very much alive. My father, Richard Chen, declared me dead 3 weeks ago to steal my inheritance and cover up his embezzlement from the family company. I held up my military ID card, my passport, and my birth certificate. These documents prove I'm alive. These documents prove I'm Maya Chen. And these documents prove that someone filed a false death certificate in my name. I placed the insurance policy on the table. This is a $5 million life insurance policy my father took out on me 6 months ago. He's been planning my death, legally speaking, for more than half a year. The room was silent except for the click of camera shutters. I'm not suffering from PTSD. I'm not mentally ill. I'm a veteran who came home to find her family had betrayed her in the worst possible way. And I'm going to prove it. I stood up, looking directly into the cameras. Tomorrow morning, I'm filing criminal charges against Richard Chen for fraud, conspiracy, and attempted identity theft. I'm also filing a civil suit to recover the money he's stolen from my family's company. And I'm asking the FBI to investigate this as a case of fraud against a military member. The press conference ended with dozens of questions shouted at once. I didn't answer any of them. I just walked out, feeling lighter than I had in months. The next morning, Captain Torres and I walked into the federal courthouse together. The charges were filed in multiple jurisdictions, federal court for the insurance fraud, state court for the identity theft, and family court for the inheritance dispute, but the real victory came 3 days later, when the FBI announced they were opening a formal investigation into Richard's activities. They'd found evidence of other financial crimes, including tax evasion and money laundering through the company. Emma called me that night. "He's been arrested," she said. "The FBI raided his office and his house. They found everything." "How do you feel about it?" "Relieved," she said. "And terrified." "Maya, I'm so sorry. I should have stood up to him years ago. We both should have. But we can't change the past. We can only move forward." The legal proceedings took 18 months. Richard was eventually sentenced to 8 years in federal prison for fraud and conspiracy. Emma received probation and community service in exchange for her cooperation. The inheritance was restored to me, along with damages for the emotional distress and legal costs. More importantly, the company was restructured with new leadership and stronger oversight, but the real victory wasn't financial. It was personal. I used part of the inheritance to start a foundation for veterans dealing with family legal issues. Too many military members come home to find their families have taken advantage of their absence. I wanted to make sure they had somewhere to turn. The foundation operates out of a small office building I bought in downtown Springfield. It's nothing fancy, just a place where veterans can get legal help, financial counseling, and emotional support. We don't ask for their sob stories or make them prove they deserve help. We just help. On the wall of my office hangs a photo of Grandpa and me at my high school graduation. He's wearing his best suit, and I'm in my cap and gown, both of us grinning like we'd just shared the world's best secret. Next to it is a quote he wrote in one of his letters: "The truth doesn't need to be loud to be powerful. It just needs to be true." I think about that a lot when I'm working with veterans who've been betrayed by their families. I tell them what I learned: sometimes the people who should protect you are the ones who hurt you most. But that doesn't mean you stop fighting. It means you fight smarter. Richard gets out of prison in 6 years. Emma and I talk occasionally, carefully rebuilding a relationship that will never be the same. Mrs. Morrison was disbarred, and her son is serving his own sentence for his role in the fraud, but the real ending isn't about justice or revenge. It's about legacy. Grandpa left me more than money. He left me a lesson about standing up for what's right, even when it costs you everything. He left me the knowledge that sometimes the best way to honor your family is to refuse to let them destroy you. I'm still Maya Chen. I'm still a veteran. I'm still alive, despite their best efforts to erase me, and that's enough. If you've made it this far, you probably know what it's like to have family members who see you as a problem to be solved rather than a person to be loved. Drop a comment about your own experiences with family betrayal. Sometimes we need to know we're not alone in this fight. Hit the subscribe button if you want more stories about quiet justice, smart strategy, and the kind of revenge that rebuilds rather than destroys. Because sometimes the best way to win a war is to refuse to become the monster your enemy wants you to be. The foundation is still growing, still helping veterans navigate the legal system when their families fail them. We've helped over 200 veterans in the past year, and we're just getting started, because in the end, the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies. It's building something they could never destroy. Something that helps other people avoid the pain they put you through. That's what Grandpa understood. That's what he left me. Not just money, but purpose, and that's a legacy worth fighting for.